You can't do this. This ranch has been in my family for 70 years. Your family? The woman's laugh cut like broken glass. Mr. Caldwell, your family lost this property the moment you ignored our emergency assessment. The auction's over. My brother just bought 4,000 acres for $62,000. You're trespassing now. She smiled. Not friendly. Predatory. I'm Nathan Caldwell, retired real estate attorney. Yesterday morning, I watched 72 years of family legacy get stolen in a rigged foreclosure that wouldn't pass a first-year law student's ethics exam. Today, I'm about to teach an entire HOA why you never illegally foreclose on a lawyer who spent 43 years destroying people exactly like them. The Highland Vista Homeowners Association thought they'd found an easy target. A 61-year-old widower trying to heal on his family's ranch in Prescott Valley, Arizona. What they found instead was someone with the skills, resources, and absolute determination to dismantle their criminal enterprise one federal charge at a time. This is how it happened. 3 months ago, I was just trying to survive. My wife, Catherine, died last spring after 38 years of marriage. Cancer took her slowly, painfully, leaving me rattling around in a house that felt too big and too quiet. Our kids suggested I move back to the ranch full-time, sell the law practice, find peace where Catherine had always been happiest. The Caldwell Ranch sits on 4,000 acres of high desert north of Prescott Valley. My grandfather William bought it in 1952 for $8,000. Back then, it was mostly scrub brush and rattlesnakes. But William had Depression-era hands that could coax life from dust. Spent 25 years building fences, digging wells, turning worthless land into prime cattle country. My father inherited it in '79, expanded operations, added modern barns. By the time I was old enough to drive, I was helping run 200 head of cattle across land William had carved from wilderness with borrowed equipment and stubborn determination. Met Catherine at a county fair when she was judging livestock competitions. She said my prize bull had kind eyes. Should have been my first warning she'd make me soft in all the right ways. We raised 2 kids here. Michael's a corporate attorney in Phoenix now. Sarah's teaching environmental law at ASU. They both wanted the ranch life until college showed them easier paths. Can't blame them. Ranching breaks your back and your bank account with equal efficiency. Catherine and I planned to retire here properly. Maybe add guest cabins. Watch grandchildren learn to rope calves. Simple dreams for simple lives. Then cancer destroyed everything. When I moved back last June, the plan was straightforward. Run cattle. Fix what broke. Maybe write that legal thriller I'd been threatening to start for 20 years. The ranch would heal me the way it had healed 3 generations of Caldwell men before me. Then Highland Vista Estates appeared. Picture this, 2019. Some California developer discovers our valley and decides it needs luxury living with mountain views. My eastern border, 2 miles of prime grazing land, gets carved into half-acre lots, selling for $350,000 each. McMansions, sprouting like weeds. I've got nothing against progress. Represented enough developers to know the game. But these weren't locals building sensible homes. These were retirees from Phoenix and Las Vegas, cashing out equity and building monuments to their own importance. Each house bigger than the last. All beige stucco and red tile. Scottsdale architecture in cattle country. Enter Diane Fletcher. I met her on a Tuesday morning that smelled like rain. She was standing at my gate, holding a clipboard like a weapon. Blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, manicured nails, smile that could freeze antifreeze. Mr. Caldwell. I'm Diane Fletcher, president of Highland Vista Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your situation. Situation. Like my family's 70-year ranch was a zoning accident requiring correction. Ma'am, I said, keeping my voice level. This ranch predates your development by 70 years. I think there's been a mistake. That smile sharpened. Mr. Caldwell. I don't make mistakes. She was about to learn otherwise. Diane didn't waste time. Within 48 hours, my mailbox started filling with certified letters like clockwork, each one arriving with official county seals that made them look legitimate. Feel legitimate. Until you actually read the absurd accusations inside. Notice of violation. Unauthorized agricultural equipment in residential zone. They meant my grandfather's 1964 International Harvester tractor, the same machine that had chugged across these fields since before most of their subdivision residents were born. Faded green paint and honest rust that came from 60 years of actual work. Apparently, its presence violated their vehicle aesthetic standards, requiring all machinery to be stored in approved structures not visible from public roads. Never mind that my property wasn't visible from their roads. Never mind that the tractor predated their development by 45 years. Never mind that calling a working farm tractor unsightly equipment was like calling the mountains excessive geological formations. The absurdity would have been funny if the threatened fines weren't $500 per day of noncompliance. Notice of violation, noise ordinance, breach residential quiet hours. My roosters were crowing at 5:30 a.20 m. The same time they'd been announcing dawn since roosters figured out the sun comes up, but according to Diane's carefully crafted bylaws, this constituted ongoing agricultural noise pollution materially affecting the peaceful enjoyment and property values of Highland Vista residents. I read that one twice while drinking coffee that had gone cold. Agricultural noise pollution from roosters on a working cattle ranch that had been operating since before any of them were born. Notice of violation, unsightly storage of farm equipment and materials. They meant my hay bales. Actual hay for actual cattle, stacked neatly beside my barn on my property that they supposedly had no jurisdiction over. Each letter described them as deteriorating organic materials, creating visual blight and potential fire hazards affecting community safety standards. The hay was fresh, well maintained, stacked according to fire code that had existed longer than their HOA. But facts didn't matter when you had a clipboard and authority complex. Each letter came with the same threat, printed in bold red text. Failure to comply within 72 hours will result in daily fines of $500 per violation, plus legal fees and potential foreclosure proceedings to recover assessed penalties. I started a file folder, labeled it HOA harassment in my careful handwriting. Watched it grow thicker than a phone book over the next few weeks. 43 years of practicing real estate law had taught me one fundamental truth. Document everything. Take photos. Save emails. Record dates. Times. And exact words spoken. Corrupt officials count on honest people not keeping meticulous records. They rely on intimidation, confusion, and the exhausting grind of bureaucratic warfare to wear down opposition. But they'd picked the wrong target. I didn't just keep records. I created evidence packages that would make prosecutors weep with joy. But Diane was just warming up. She began driving past my property twice daily, always with different board members riding shotgun. They'd stop at my gate, point, photograph everything, My cattle drinking from stock ponds. My irrigation ditches. My equipment, all documented like evidence at a crime scene. The real genius came when she started visiting my actual neighbors. The ranchers who'd been here since before McMansions were anyone's nightmare. Diane would show up with pamphlets about agricultural nuisances and protecting property values. She painted me as the problem neighbor, guy whose cattle smelled bad, whose roosters ruined peaceful mornings, whose operation threatened everyone's investments. Most folks told her where to go, but she found converts among newer arrivals. City people who'd bought 5-acre ranchettes thinking they wanted rural life, then discovered actual ranching involves actual smells. The bombshell came during an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't invited. Didn't know about it until Dale Morrison. Old-timer, running cattle, next section over. Called that Thursday evening. His voice carried disbelief you hear when someone witnesses something truly audacious. Nathan, your new best friend just pulled something special. Voted to hit you with a $53,000 emergency assessment. Roads. Claims your operation's damaging county infrastructure. The number hit like a physical blow. Dale, my grandfather built half those roads. Preaching to the choir. But here's the kicker. They claim county approval for this assessment. Something about you being included in their jurisdiction due to boundary adjustments. That's when I knew I was dealing with organized fraud. Next morning, I showed up at their regular meeting uninvited. Armed with original surveyor maps and my grandfather's land patents, the community center smelled like stale coffee and nervous sweat. I stood during public comment, spread my documents on their folding table, let my courtroom voice fill the room. Ladies and gentlemen, show me legal documentation proving this HOA has jurisdiction over property that predates your incorporation by 70 years. Diane's face went chalk white. She shuffled papers like she was looking for winning lottery tickets in a pile of bills. Mr. Caldwell, the boundary realignment is public record. Show me. Silence after direct questions is usually admission. Show me one legitimate surveyor's report. One county-approved boundary change. One piece of legal documentation proving your authority. The room went quiet, except for fluorescent lights, humming. Board members studied their shoes. Diane couldn't produce anything. Watching her squirm gave me an idea that would make my grandfather proud. Diane learned from that humiliation. Instead of backing down, she doubled down. 2 weeks later, I found a thick envelope wedged in my screen door. Sterling and Associates, downtown address. The kind of law firm charging $500 to spell your name right. The cease and desist letter was impressive. Ongoing trespassing of livestock onto HOA common areas. Immediate removal required. $500 per day per animal. Civil and criminal penalties may apply. I walked my fence line with methodical attention. Every post solid. Every wire tight. Every gate latched. My cattle were exactly where they'd been for 70 years. On Caldwell land. That's when the sabotage began. Next morning, I woke to truck doors slamming and cattle bawling in distress. Threw on boots. Grabbed my flashlight. Headed into pre-dawn darkness. 3 sections of fence had been cut clean through. Professional job. Wire cutters. Not jagged tears from kids or coyotes. My cattle had wandered through gaps onto HOA common areas. By 6 a.m., Diane had already called 911 about dangerous animals loose. The deputy who responded was young and apologetic. Mr. Caldwell. Any idea how this happened? I showed him the cut posts. Clean wire ends. Obvious sabotage. Deputy. Cattle don't carry bolt cutters? By 8 a.m. The local news van arrived. Channel 12's reporter. Earnest young woman with perfect hair. Interviewed Diane in front of the community center. This is exactly what we've warned about. Diane told the camera. And that's when I first really saw her as more than just a voice on my phone and papers in my mailbox. She wore a blazer that caught the morning sun crimson red, fitted perfectly. Draped casually off her shoulders to reveal a black silk blouse with a V-neck that somehow managed to be both professional and deliberately distracting. The vibrant color demanded attention against the beige stucco buildings. Her pencil skirt matched the black top, cut with a subtle slit. Red patent heels clicked against pavement as she gestured toward my property. Mr. Caldwell's reckless operations put our families at risk. She continued. Those perfectly glossed lips, same crimson as her blazer, forming words designed to destroy my reputation. What if a child had been hurt? Her auburn hair fell in styled waves just past her shoulders. Everything about her appearance screamed calculated control. Money and power wrapped in suburban respectability. But something interesting happened that afternoon. I was installing trail cameras around my property when Diane's brother-in-law's teenage son came slouching up my driveway. Kid couldn't have been more than 17. All gangly limbs and guilty conscience. Mr. Caldwell, I need to tell you something. 20 minutes later, I had the whole story. Tyler Fletcher, Brian being Diane's brother-in-law and eventual buyer of my ranch at that rigged auction. The kid had been recruited for what Diane called community service, $500 cash to create strategic openings in my fence. He was scared, remorseful, willing to tell truth. I made him a deal William would have appreciated. Tell your father the truth, and I won't press charges. Stay quiet. And I'll let the sheriff handle felony vandalism. By evening, Brian was on my porch with his hat in his hands. Son beside him, both looking miserable. Nathan, I had no idea what Diane was planning. Brian said, Tyler's going to make this right. Brian, this won't stop with fence cutting. Diane's playing a bigger game than harassment. That conversation gave me more than evidence of sabotage. It gave me insight into Diane's methods, her willingness to break laws, her pattern of recruiting others for dirty work. As I watched their taillights disappear, I realized I needed to dig deeper into exactly what kind of operation Diane was running. Diane wasn't done. The fence cutting taught her to escalate faster. Within a week, she dropped the nuclear option. Foreclosure proceedings. The certified letter arrived Tuesday morning. Smelled like rain and impending doom. Notice of lien and intent to foreclose blazed across the top in red letters. Diane had filed a $53,000 lien against my ranch for phantom emergency assessments. Moving to expedited foreclosure under state law, 30 days. Pay extortion or lose everything, 3 generations built from dust and determination. I sat on my porch that evening, storm clouds gathering over mountains, reading legal paperwork that made coffee taste like ash. The foreclosure was technically legal. HOAs have lien authority when properly exercised. But everything about this reeked of corruption. Diane was gambling. I'd either pay ransom or lose everything fighting in court. What she didn't realize was she'd handed a real estate attorney a textbook case of foreclosure fraud. While I planned legal counterattack, Diane launched propaganda. She organized a community safety meeting at the local church. Professional flyers on every windshield within 10 miles. Protect our families from agricultural hazards. Photo of my cattle peacefully drinking from stock ponds. The meeting drew 30 people, mostly subdivision retirees, plus newer rural residents wanting country living without actual country. I didn't attend, but Dale did. "Nathan, you missed quite a show," Dale said afterward. "Diane had PowerPoint slides. Charts showing contamination from your irrigation. Noise maps from your roosters. She's got city folks convinced your cattle are weapons." What about locals? Most walked out when she started talking about modernizing agricultural land use, but she recruited enough believers to petition the county for immediate eviction. The real brilliance revealed itself when she announced my voluntary retirement auction, posted notices advertising the dignified end of an era sale. She was rewriting history in real time, turning theft into heartwarming story about old rancher gracefully stepping aside for progress. Channel 12 swallowed it completely. End of Family Farming Era ran as lead human interest story. Misty footage of my grandfather's tractor. Voiceover about inevitable change. They gave Diane 5 minutes of free airtime, but her arrogance created the opening I needed. The foreclosure auction was legal theater, scheduled for 10 a.m. Wednesday with minimum notice. Only 2 bidders appeared, Brian Fletcher and something called Desert Vista Development, LLC. Brian won with $62,000, barely covering the fabricated lien that stole my $9 million ranch. I watched from across the street, documenting everything. The courthouse steps smelled like diesel and defeat, but I kept taking notes. After the gavel sealed my fate, I followed Brian to the county clerk's office, watched him file deed paperwork with shaking hands. That's where I discovered the smoking gun. The deed listed Desert Vista Development LLC as development coordination partner with exclusive rights to future land use. Quick dive into state records revealed Desert Vista was owned by Summit Holdings, owned by Highland Investments, ultimately tracing back to Diane Marie Fletcher. She hadn't just stolen my ranch, she'd stolen it for herself, using her brother-in-law as puppet to hide massive conflict of interest. The entire foreclosure was elaborate fraud to acquire valuable property for pennies on the dollar. But the deeper I dug, the sicker it got. 3 other longtime residents had been foreclosed by the same HOA over 2 years. All went to board members' relatives. All later flipped for massive profits. This wasn't harassment. This was organized racketeering with suburban address and manicured bylaws, standing in that courthouse holding proof of systematic fraud. I felt something I hadn't experienced since Catherine's funeral. Absolute clarity about what needed to happen next. Diane thought she'd broken a grieving widower. She was about to discover what happens when you steal from someone who's made a career, destroying people exactly like her. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I'd lost my ranch. Though watching 72 years of family history get auctioned off for pocket change wasn't exactly restful, but because my lawyer brain kept circling back to something fundamental that didn't add up. Why had Diane moved so fast? Most HOA disputes drag on for years, buried in bureaucracy, lost in endless appeals and counter motions, and procedural delays that exhaust everyone involved. That's how the system's designed. Slow grinding machinery that favors whoever has more money and patience. But Diane had gone from first contact to foreclosure in under 6 months, racing through procedures that should have taken years, like she was sprinting against some invisible deadline I couldn't see. So at 3 a.m., I did what any insomniac attorney does when sleep won't come. Made strong coffee, pulled public records, started connecting dots. My home office still smelled like vanilla candles Catherine used to burn while grading papers at the kitchen table. I spread county documents across my desk like evidence at a murder trial, cross-referencing HOA and corporation papers with property assessments and development permits. That's when I found the first crack in Diane's perfect scheme. Original HOA and corporation documents from 2019 showed boundaries that explicitly excluded my ranch. Crystal clear surveyor maps filed with the county showing Highland Vista Estates ending exactly at my property line. Deliberately drawn to avoid exactly this kind of jurisdictional dispute, my ranch wasn't just outside their authority. It had been specifically excluded. But 6 months ago, someone had filed an amended boundary designation, expanding HOA authority to include my property and 3 other adjacent ranches. Paperwork looked official, complete with county clerk stamps and a surveyor's signature on documents that had been notarized and filed through proper channels, except Harold Peterson, the surveyor whose signature appeared on those boundary amendments, had been dead for 3 years. I knew because I'd worked with Harold on dozens of property disputes over the years. Good man. Honest, professional, had died of a heart attack in his office while reviewing subdivision plats. Someone had literally forged a dead man's credentials to steal my ranch, banking on overworked county clerks not taking time to verify signatures on routine administrative filings that crossed their desks by the hundreds every week. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth as I stared at Harold's forged signature. This wasn't just fraud. This was calculated, premeditated, systematic criminal conspiracy. My hand reached for the phone. Sheriff's Department, right now. Thumb hovering over call button. Then I stopped. My hand was shaking, not from fear. From rage so pure it made my vision narrow and my jaw clench until my teeth ached. What would I tell them? That someone forged a dead surveyor's signature. They'd ask if I had proof of intent. Evidence of who specifically committed the forgery, direct connection to ongoing crimes, rather than historical document fraud that might be statute limited. I'd be handing them a crime report that would sit in a filing cabinet while Diane's lawyers buried the investigation in motions and delays and legal technicalities that could take years to resolve. Meanwhile, she'd know I'd figured out her game, would adjust her strategy accordingly. Cover tracks I hadn't even found yet. Destroy evidence I hadn't documented. For the first time since this started, I realized how close I was to destroying everything. One wrong move. One premature call to authorities. One moment of letting anger override strategy. I could blow the entire case before I had enough evidence to make charges stick. I put the phone down, took 3 deep breaths, the way Catherine used to make me do when I came home furious from particularly frustrating cases. Started thinking like prosecutor instead of victim. What I needed wasn't a crime report. What I needed was an ironclad case that would send Diane to federal prison for years. But forgery was just the appetizer. As dawn broke, I discovered the main course buried in the assessor's database. Highland Vista HOA owed $370,000 in back taxes. While Diane screamed about my delinquent assessments, her organization hadn't paid property taxes in 3 years. They claimed nonprofit status on IRS filings while operating clearly for-profit land scheme. The irony was thick enough to spread on toast. I pulled federal tax returns. Compared against state and corporation documents, every filing contradicted the others. They told the IRS they were charitable, told the state they reported development income, told the county they were homeowners association, told the feds they were conservation organization. This wasn't just fraud. This was federal racketeering. But the discovery that froze my blood came from title company records. Every property foreclosed by the HOA over 2 years had immediately transferred to development companies owned by board members' families. The Henderson Horse Ranch became Diane's nephew's RV park. The Martinez farm became the treasurer's daughter's wedding venue. My ranch was destined to become Caldwell Luxury Estates, Brian's construction company's flagship project. Criminal enterprise that perfected legal theft. Diane wasn't stealing individual properties. She was systematically looting an entire rural community under legitimate-sounding cover of Homeowners Association authority. Morning sun streamed through windows as I understood what I was really fighting. This wasn't about getting my ranch back. This was about stopping criminal organization that turned suburban governance into organized crime. And I'd just become the only witness who could prove it. For the first time since Catherine's death, I felt something approaching joy. Savage joy. Diane had made every mistake in the criminal handbook. Got greedy. Moved too fast. Targeted someone with 43 years experience destroying people exactly like her. Game on. Next morning. I called in cavalry. First call went to Michael in Phoenix. Son, I need you to take vacation time and help your old man commit some perfectly legal warfare. Dad, what kind of trouble are you in? The good kind, where we destroy corrupt officials and maybe save families from getting robbed blind. He was on the road by noon. Second call went to Harrison Mills, my former law partner who'd made a career eviscerating corrupt HOAs. Nathan, you magnificent bastard, he said when I explained the situation. Forged dead surveyor's signature. That's federal mail fraud. Conspiracy. Racketeering. We can bury these people. Third call was to Dale Garrison, retired police detective turned private investigator. Dale, I need you inside these people's financial records. How dirty. Dirtier than a cattle yard in August. By Thursday evening, my kitchen had transformed into war room. Smell of strong coffee. Sound of papers rustling. Keyboards clicking. Michael spread corporate documents across every surface. Dale's surveillance equipment hummed. Harrison made phone calls that end political careers. Dad, Michael said, looking up from tax returns. This is insane. HOA claims $2.1 million annual revenue, but bank statements show $8.3 million flowing through shell companies. Dale looked up from his computer, grinning like a shark. Nathan, Diane has judgments against her in 4 states for real estate fraud. She was selling bogus investments to retirees until 2018 when Arizona shut her down. Changed her name. Moved here. Reinvented herself. What about other board members? Treasurer's been embezzling from her church for 7 years. Secretary filed bankruptcy last year, but somehow bought a $500,000 boat 3 months ago. And Brian's construction company has never pulled a single building permit. But his bank shows $2.3 million in HOA paid contracts. Our 4th team member was Janet Reeves. Owned the county's main title company for 18 years. Nathan, I've been watching these foreclosures, wondering when someone with actual training would connect dots. She said, every transfer violated state disclosure laws. No proper notices. No adequate bidding periods. No required documentation. Evening light slanted through windows when I explained the weapon that would win this war. Arizona allows property owners to create agricultural preservation districts with broad conservation powers. I said, these districts can exercise eminent domain to protect rural land from inappropriate development. Meaning, Harrison asked, though I could tell he was already following my logic. Meaning they can force property sales at agricultural use value instead of development value. Established by any property owner with legitimate operations, like a 4,000-acre cattle ranch. Michael's pen stopped moving. Dad, You're talking about using eminent domain to force the entire HOA to sell their homes at agricultural prices. Exactly. Agricultural use value here runs about $1,100 per acre. Those McMansions on half-acre lots would be worth roughly $550 each instead of $350,000. Harrison started laughing with deep satisfaction lawyers feel when opponents walk into perfect legal traps. You're going to legally steal their houses the same way they illegally stole your ranch. Same way. Except completely legitimate. They wanted to play real estate games using forged documents. Two can play that game. Outside my window. I could hear evening cattle call echoing across land, still technically mine for a few more days. Soon, those sounds would come from property I'd legally acquired from people who'd tried to silence them forever. Justice has a wicked sense of humor. Diane must have sensed the noose tightening. Maybe it was how I'd stopped responding to her frantic letters. Or maybe predators develop sixth sense when prey starts hunting back. She launched Scorched Earth. Health inspector showed up Tuesday dawn looking embarrassed, carrying more paperwork than a tax audit. Mr. Caldwell, we've received 19 complaints about groundwater contamination. Anonymous tips claiming immediate public health emergency. I poured him coffee while he tested water from the well that kept my family healthy for 70 years. Sir, your water's cleaner than most city folks drink, he said. Someone's really got it out for you. While Diane weaponized county bureaucracy, Brian escalated to direct sabotage. 3 contractor liens appeared overnight. Against everything I owned, my truck, my tractor, even the cattle, all claimed unpaid bills for work never done, filed by companies existing only on paper. Michael worked 16-hour days getting emergency injunctions. But each false lien cost time and legal fees, death by 1,000 paperwork cuts. But the attack showing real desperation came when she tried having me disbarred. Filed complaint with State Bar Association claiming I'd provided unauthorized legal advice when challenging HOA jurisdiction. Never mind, I was defending my own property. Never mind, I'd been licensed longer than she'd been alive. Bar Investigative Committee was polite, but thorough, requiring documentation of every word I'd spoken publicly. Another fishing expedition keeping me busy fighting bureaucracy. That's when the twist hit that changed everything. I was reviewing bar paperwork, wondering how many more agencies Diane could weaponize, when Dale burst through my door, carrying surveillance equipment, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Nathan, you need to see this now. He set up his laptop, screen glowing in afternoon light. Remember that coffee shop where board members keep meeting? Finally got close enough with directional microphone. Audio was crystal clear. Diane's voice recorded yesterday afternoon. The county commissioner wants another $12,000 for the zoning variance. And we need the assessor to reclassify 4 more properties as blighted before winter. What about Caldwell? He's asking too many questions. Caldwell's finished. Diane's voice carried satisfaction of someone who thought she'd outsmarted everyone. I've got State Bar investigating him. Health Department ready to condemn his water. Brian's filing more liens tomorrow. The old fool will be bankrupt and disbarred before Christmas. My coffee tasted like acid. Then Diane said something that made my blood freeze. Once we clear remaining ranchers, we'll control 14,000 acres. Phoenix investors willing to pay $48 million for the entire package, plus ongoing consulting fees. This wasn't about my ranch. This was systematic theft of every rural property in the county. Selling to out-of-state developers. My family's land was just biggest prize in criminal enterprise worth tens of millions. The beauty, Diane continued, is we're using their own legal system against them. HOA foreclosures. Eminent domain claims. Violations. All perfectly legal when you know which officials to pay. Dale looked at me across the table. Nathan, this isn't harassment anymore. This is conspiracy, bribery, racketeering. Enough federal charges to put her away until she collects Social Security. But while they plotted my destruction, my team prepared something that would destroy theirs. Agricultural Preservation District was approved. Eminent Domain Authority confirmed. Michael had finished filing federal complaints with FBI's white-collar division. Perfect irony. While Diane thought she was crushing lonely widower with bureaucratic warfare, she'd been confessing crimes to a retired prosecutor who specialized in exactly this kind of fraud. Tomorrow, we'd serve papers turning her entire subdivision into agricultural land, worth about $550 per house. She wanted to use legal system as weapon. Let me show her how it's really done. Diane's final gambit was pure desperation, wrapped in respectability. Community Safety Summit at the high school gymnasium. Professional banners. Catered refreshments. Enough propaganda to make a dictator proud. Flyers everywhere. Emergency meeting about agricultural safety. Photo of my cattle under stormy skies. But this wasn't just another meeting. Diane had invited county commissioners, sheriff's department, local news, what she called concerned citizens from across the region. She was staging public execution. Dale's surveillance showed her spending previous week coaching residents, distributing prepared statements, promising gift cards to families speaking against me. Morning of the meeting, I announced my own event. Retirement liquidation auction of all ranch equipment. Same day, same time. Let local news cover the end of farming story while I prepared to reclaim everything. Michael handled media with precision. My father's stepping away from ranching to focus on legal consulting. This auction represents the end of one chapter and beginning of another. Reporter ate it up. Human interest story. Dignified conclusion. Tearful goodbyes. What they didn't know was I'd already purchased back every piece through shell companies. Michael established buyers at auction were allies who'd return everything once dust settled. But Diane saw exactly what I wanted her to see. Total surrender from broken old man. Her summit drew 60 people to the gymnasium, mostly subdivision residents. Handful of actual ranchers coming to see what insanity neighbors were peddling. Smell of floor wax and nervous sweat. Diane set up PowerPoint like announcing cancer cure. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, and there she was again. That crimson blazer catching gymnasium lights like beacon of authority. The color seemed to pulse against drab walls. Black silk blouse beneath revealed just enough to distract. Red heels clicked against floor as she paced. But something was off. Her right hand kept touching her collarbone. Nervous tick I'd never seen before. 3 times in 2 minutes. The blazer hung slightly crooked. Not much. Just enough. Those glossy crimson lips were perfect. But when she thought no one looked, she bit inside of her cheek. The pacing was different. Less confident. More contained. Like walking tightrope instead of owning stage. Small things most wouldn't notice. But I'd been watching her for 3 months. These weren't movements of someone in control. These were movements of someone barely holding on. We're here because our community faces environmental and safety crisis, threatening our children's health and property values. What followed was masterclass in propaganda. Professional charts showing contamination vectors, noise pollution maps, traffic safety analysis. She'd even brought environmental scientists who testified about agricultural runoff dangers. Man had impressive credentials. Spoke with authority, making laypeople nod along. Local ranchers walked out when Diane began discussing transitioning away from outdated agricultural uses, but enough residents stayed to create appearance of consensus. Real theater came during public comment, one by one. Coached residents described how my ranch destroyed their quality of life. Children couldn't sleep due to roosters. Property values plummeting due to odors. Families considering moving due to safety concerns. Academy Award performance. Except audience was county commissioners with power to shut down my operation. Sheriff Deputy Rodriguez looked increasingly uncomfortable as testimony grew hysterical. When one woman claimed my cattle traumatized her children by existing within sight of her backyard, he started taking skeptical notes. But Diane's masterstroke came when she introduced expert witness, Dr. Edmund Sterling, supposedly agricultural safety consultant from State University. He testified about industrial farming hazards, recommended immediate cessation of livestock operations pending environmental review. I recognized the name from the law firm sending cease and desist letters. Dr. Sterling was actually junior associate with masters in environmental law. Not agricultural science, another layer of fraud. As meeting wound down with commissioners promising to review evidence, I sat in back row, taking notes, recording everything on my phone. Let them think they'd won. Let Diane believe her campaign finally broke. Stubborn old rancher. Tomorrow morning, she'd discover what happens when you declare war on someone who spent 43 years learning to destroy people exactly like her. Gymnasium lights flickered as people filed out, many stopping to shake Diane's hand, congratulate her on standing up for community. She beamed like politician on election night, convinced she'd delivered killing blow. She had no idea she'd provided final evidence I needed to end her criminal enterprise forever. County Commissioners' meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. Thursday. Smelled like justice. Tasted like revenge. I arrived early. Parking where, 3 months ago, I'd watched my ranch get auctioned for chump change. This time, I wasn't coming as victim. I was coming as prosecutor with enough evidence to end careers and send people to federal prison. Michael and Harrison flanked me, each carrying banker's boxes full of documentation. Dale followed with surveillance equipment, grinning like man about to watch favorite movie. Commissioner's chambers buzzed with anticipation. Local news crews had set up after Michael leaked just enough. Something about major corruption revelations and systematic fraud. Channel 12's investigative reporter looked eager to redeem herself for missing real story. Diane arrived 20 minutes later. White blazer that probably cost more than rent? Surrounded by entire board, she nodded confidently to cameras, expecting another victory lap. She had no idea she was walking into ambush. Meeting started with routine business. Then Commissioner Walsh called special session to order. We're here to address disputes between Highland Vista Homeowners Association and Mr. Nathan Caldwell. Diane stood gracefully, moving to podium with confidence of someone who'd never lost public fight. She began standard presentation. Property values, public safety, environmental concerns, commissioners. Evidence is overwhelming. Mr. Caldwell's operations pose ongoing threat to our community's health and safety. She was still talking when I stood. Commissioners. I'd like to address organized criminal conspiracy that's been systematically defrauding property owners in this county for 3 years. Room went dead silent. You could hear fluorescent lights humming. Commissioner Walsh nodded. Mr. Caldwell, you're recognized. I walked to podium carrying single manila folder. Sometimes most devastating attacks come from simplest presentations. Commissioners. My name is Nathan Caldwell. I'm here to report federal crimes including mail fraud, tax evasion, bribery of public officials, and racketeering conspiracy. Diane's face went from tan to white, literally. I watched it happen, pink to white, in 3 seconds. I opened folder, began reading from Dale's transcripts. The county commissioner wants another $12,000 for the zoning variance. That's Mrs. Fletcher's voice recorded 6 days ago discussing bribes with unknown co-conspirators. Reporter's camera swung toward Diane. She was gripping her chair like it was only thing keeping her upright. Furthermore, Highland Vista HOA has been operating as organized criminal enterprise, using forged documents to steal properties, transfer them to board members' family companies. I held up smoking gun. Harold Peterson's forged signature on boundary amendment. This signature belongs to Harold Peterson, county surveyor who died 3 years before this document was allegedly signed. Commissioner Walsh was reaching for phone. In back row, Deputy Rodriguez quietly spoke into radio. But here came my mic drop. Commissioners, I've established the Caldwell Agricultural Preservation District under state conservation law. This district has eminent domain authority over all properties within its jurisdiction. I smiled the way trial lawyers smile when delivering verdicts ending careers. Effective immediately. I'm exercising eminent domain to acquire every property in Highland Vista Estates for agricultural conservation at fair market value, which, for agricultural use, is approximately $550 per half-acre lot. Diane shot to feet. This is harassment conspiracy. You can't steal people's homes. Ma'am, I said, keeping voice level and professional. I'm not stealing anything. I'm using exactly the same legal mechanisms you used to steal my ranch, except everything I'm doing is completely legitimate. County Attorney Sarah Mitchell stood. Mr. Caldwell, are you prepared to turn over evidence? Yes. Ma'am? My son has copies for FBI, State Attorney General, and IRS. Federal agents standing by. Room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Board members pointed fingers. Diane began screaming about persecution while Deputy Rodriguez moved toward her. Justice tastes better than Catherine's apple pie. Diane was arrested before meeting adjourned. Watching federal agents lead her out in handcuffs while cameras rolled was sweeter than Catherine's apple pie on Sunday morning. Dominoes fell with beautiful precision. Brian lost contractor's license within week. Company bankrupted by legal fees and federal fines. Junior associate who'd been promised consulting fees got disbarred. Now works at used car lot. County clerk who'd accepted bribes got fired. Lost pension. Moved 3 states away. Diane got 4 years federal prison and $600,000 in restitution. Judge called her Operation Masterclass in suburban racketeering, preying on honest families' trust. Brian received 20 months. Forfeited every property acquired through fraud. Real justice came when my agricultural preservation district's eminent domain kicked in. Every McMansion in Highland Vista legally acquired at agricultural use value. Exactly $550 per half-acre lot. Families who'd paid $350,000 suddenly holding checks that wouldn't cover decent pickup. Most relocated quietly, grateful to escape before investigators finished unraveling threads. Few tried fighting eminent domain in court. But agricultural preservation districts have ironclad authority when properly established. Irony was perfect. They'd stolen my ranch using fraudulent technicalities. I'd recovered it using completely legitimate ones. But here's where story gets better than simple revenge. Instead of keeping all reclaimed land, I established Caldwell Community Foundation with settlement money county paid for enabling fraud. Foundation provides free legal assistance to homeowners fighting corrupt HOAs across 4 states. Smell of justice brewing in our conference rooms became my favorite aroma. We've helped 83 families recover properties stolen through similar schemes. Turns out Diane's operation wasn't unique, just most brazen example of cancer spreading through rural America. One forged document at a time. Ranch itself became something Catherine would have loved. We converted subdivisions' common areas into educational pastures. Local schools bring kids to learn about agriculture and conservation. Children's laughter echoes across land that almost became soulless development. Michael moved back from Phoenix, opening satellite law office specializing in HOA litigation and property rights defense. More business than he can handle. Watching him work from Catherine's old sewing room fills my heart with pride that tastes like morning coffee and honest work. Sarah returned from ASU and runs Ranch's educational programs. Last month, I watched her teach city kids how to rope calves in same pasture where her great-grandfather learned ranching. Continuity of it, past, present. Future connected by honest land and honest work makes every sleepless night of legal warfare worthwhile. Foundation established Catherine Caldwell Memorial Scholarship for agricultural students studying sustainable ranching. This year, awarded 22 scholarships, including 4 to kids whose families' properties we'd saved. Every month, we host Know Your Rights workshops at Ranch, teaching property owners how to recognize and fight HOA scams. Sessions packed with folks who've heard horror stories. State Legislature passed Caldwell Act, strengthening property owner rights, requiring independent oversight of HOA foreclosures. Won't stop all corruption, but makes life harder for suburban pirates like Diane. 4 neighboring counties established their own preservation districts using our template. It's becoming movement that makes William's spirit smile. So remember this: bullies count on good people accepting abuse as price of peace. But sometimes, when you've lost everything, that matters. You discover best revenge is helping others avoid same fate. Your HOA giving you hell. Drop a comment. You might be surprised how many rights you have when someone teaches you to use them. Next week, the woman whose HOA tried foreclosing over an American flag and how she ended up owning President's house instead. Justice tastes best when shared.